Hello, good evening. It's 10 o'clock. Welcome to The World Tonight. I'm Nuala McGovern. An inquest has found that an Ofsted inspection contributed to the death of a head teacher. Ruth Perry took her own life last January. Today, her sister welcomed the ruling.
All through these last horrible 11 months, as well as trying to grieve, we've been kind of battling to make sure it can't happen again.
We'll hear from the chair of the Education Committee. Thank you so much, Chris. You're listening to The World Tonight with Nuala McGovern. Ruth Perry took her own life in January while waiting for a school report to be published. Today, almost a year on, an inquest has ruled that an Ofsted school inspection contributed to the death of the head teacher. The senior coroner said the school inspection lacked fairness, respect and sensitivity and was at times rude and intimidating. Mrs Perry had been head teacher at Caversham Primary School in Reading for 13 years, and in that time it had always been judged outstanding. The previous month, inspectors had visited and Ruth Perry knew they were going to downgrade her school to the lowest rating, which was inadequate. In the weeks after that inspection, Ruth wrote a series of notes, later found by her family, revealing the turmoil that she was going through. She wrote, "Every space is filled with my feelings of wretchedness and desperation. I wake from restless sleep, absolutely panic-stricken." Her sister, Julia Waters, speaking to the BBC after today's ruling, said she and her family felt vindicated.
It feels like a kind of release that, all through these last horrible 11 months, as well as trying to grieve, we've been kind of battling to make sure it can't happen again. And whilst we have had the ear of the Secretary of State for Education and various people in the DFE, the Ofsted themselves have just absolutely, repeatedly, categorically refused to acknowledge that anything went wrong. So there's this relief and release, if you like, that finally there is an official public recognition of what we've been saying all along.
In response to the findings of the inquest, the Chief Inspector of Ofsted, Amanda Spielman, has released a statement, and part of it saying that Ofsted has started to develop training for all inspectors on how to recognise and respond to visible signs of anxiety. She also said they would bring lead school inspectors together to establish what to do if a pause is needed. And they would make it clear that school leaders can be accompanied by colleagues in meetings with inspectors and that they can discuss inspection outcomes with colleagues, family, medical advisors and their wider support group before these are shared with parents. Previously, there was a confidentiality agreement. Earlier, I spoke to Robin Walker, Conservative MP for Worcester and Chair of the House of Commons Education Select Committee. What did he make of the coroner's report?
This was an absolute tragedy, clearly, and it is very significant that the inquest has found that there is a likelihood that the Ofsted inspection played a significant role in that. I mean, that is something which, having met with Julia, Ruth Perry's sister, always seemed to be highly likely, but I think this confirms the issue. This was one of the factors underlying the fact that we decided as a committee to look into the role of Ofsted earlier this year, and obviously we have been conducting an inquiry during the course of this inquest hearing, and we had to be very careful not to prejudice the inquest in any way, and we went out of our way to do that. But it is clearly a concern about the level of trust between the inspectorate and teachers and head teachers and the level of pressure that head teachers feel under. And so these are issues that we will be touching on, and certainly we'll be taking the coroner's very significant findings into account.
Ruth Perry's sister, Julia Waters, has said that the inquest had revealed the brutal inhumanity of Ofsted inspections. She said, "We've no confidence that Ofsted, under its current leadership and management, is either willing or able to make the widespread root and branch reforms to its system and culture that are so urgently needed." And the changes that have been proposed by Ofsted that have been published so far, they're not root and branch reforms. What do you think is going to happen?
I think there are a range of issues here. And of course, I'm sure Ofsted will want to reflect on the findings of the inquest, and they will want to reflect on what further action that they can take. But I think it's important to also reflect that there are jobs here for the government as well as Ofsted. Part of the concern that we've heard on the committee about the high stakes nature of inspections. It isn't really in the gift of the inspectorate themselves to change that. That is something that is to do with government policy, and that will need to be looked at, I think, in the light of this inquest finding. One of the arguments that Julia herself has made is around a duty of care for Ofsted when carrying out inspections, and I think that is something that we'll need to look at very carefully.
Why do you think it didn't happen? You would think it is a basic management tactic, to be quite honest, when it comes to carrying out any inspection, that people would be on the lookout for people with mental health distress, anxiety. How do you understand that it went so far and so wrong?
It is, and you're quite right to describe it as a management tactic. I think part of the challenge is that the role of the inspectorate, of course, is not management. The role of the inspectorate is around going in and making an impartial assessment. And the role of management and the responsible bodies that sit behind schools is to provide the support and the help that people want. And yeah, clearly in that case, those systems didn't work properly. That is something that I think we do need to make sure that we learn from this and ensure that the right support is there.
How long do you think that will take?
We'll be making our recommendations early in the new year, and that was designed to make sure that we could take account the outcome of the inquest, but also to make sure that we can make those recommendations to an incoming chief inspector for what they can do. But I think it is really important in this that we recognise that there are learnings for Ofsted from this, there are learnings for government from this as well, and there are learnings for school management as to how they support leaders. I think all of those we need to look at now, and we need to make sure we can make strong recommendations that reflect the fact that I think there is a political consensus now on the need for an inspectorate, but we need to have an inspectorate that is trusted and respected by the teaching profession and by leaders. And there does seem to have been a serious deterioration of trust over recent years.
Would you propose limiting the work of Ofsted until the changes are initiated?
I don't think that's really a possibility, given that there are important roles for Ofsted to do, particularly on safeguarding, and that is across the system, not just in schools, but also in children's social care and other areas. But I think it is really important that they take into account these recommendations and take action on it.
Robin Walker, Conservative MP, thanks to him. Well, I want to turn now to Zena Hobson, former chair of Ofsted. That was between 2006 and 2011. Welcome to the World Tonight. The coroner said she found parts of Ofsted inspection lacking fairness, respect and sensitivity. Is that something you observed?
I think certainly the inspections are done by human beings, and of course, when you've got a big workforce, there will be at times where you have a workforce where one or two individuals will let you down.
Do you think it's that, though? Sorry to interrupt you, but you really think it's just one or two individuals? From my reading of the inquest's findings, it seemed more that this was systemic. And also you will have heard from Ruth's sister saying wanted a root and branch reform of the leadership, of the management of Ofsted.
And what I was going to say is that certainly in my time, I did see inspections that fell short of expectations. However, I think since then what's happened is that Ofsted hasn't changed, adapted and grown. So actually the single word judgments, for an example, had a place at some point in time. I genuinely don't think they have any place now. And I think some of that goes back to what Robin was saying earlier about how that now impacts on government policy as well. And that in particular, that single word judgment inadequate triggers a state maintained school into becoming an academy. And so the stakes have just got higher and there's been no adaptation from Ofsted. And I do think that the current system is outdated and unhelpful. And in this tragic case, and our hearts go out to the family, and in this tragic case had really appalling consequences.
I mean, how optimistic are you that there will be something put in place that will avert situations like this, which was devastating, but also ones that may not lead to a death, but do lead to such intense stress and anxiety for those that are trying their best running a school?
I think it's going to take sort of three things. One is a completely different approach from the new chief inspector coming in. Under Amanda Spillman, it's quite clear that things aren't going to change, and she's going because she's had ample opportunity change it in her entire tenure, never mind just in the last year. So I think it's down to a new chief inspector. I think it's down to the Department for Education creating a new framework for Ofsted and giving very clear direction and guidance. And I think it's down to a cultural shift in Ofsted. It does feel like as an organisation that culture is not working. It's not serving properly the inspectors, but it's certainly not serving schools.
Senna Hobson, former chair of Ofsted between 2006 and 2011. Thank you so much.